Welcome to Chamber Champions. I'm Derek Miller with the Salt Lake Chamber, Utah's voice for business. Each week, we take the opportunity to speak with leaders from business, government, education, and community service organizations who are making a difference in Utah. As a Chamber Champion, these individuals are recognized for their contributions and provided a forum to empower their vision and objectives. Hi, I'm Derek Miller, President and CEO of the Salt Lake Chamber and Downtown Alliance, and today I'm joined with Liz Owens, the CEO of YWCA Utah. As we celebrate Women's History Month, there's no better time to remember and recognize the individuals and organizations who are doing so much to support our community, especially those organizations that are serving, protecting, and empowering others. Liz, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Derek.
You know, every organization over the past year has had to adjust so much, and so I want to talk to you about some of the adjustments that you've made in your role. Now 11 months, you just told me.
Yeah.
I'm sure an exciting and maybe in many ways unexpected 11 months. But before we get into those adjustments, why don't you just give our viewers sort of the overview of the work of the YWCA in case they may not be aware?
Yeah, so the YWCA is 115 years old in Utah. YWCA Utah is 115 years old this May. We have been at the corner of 3rd South and 3rd East for at least 100 years, 101 years. And we have been providing services for women. And that has changed over the years. Originally, there was it was a boarding house for women, and eventually that kind of shifted and changed and morphed into what is now known as the Road Home. And as our society has changed and our community's needs have changed and the needs of women in Utah have changed, our organization has tried to adapt to meet the needs of those most vulnerable. And so one of the ways that we've done that is by starting the first domestic violence shelter in Utah, and that was in the 70s. And currently we provide the largest, most comprehensive domestic violence services in the state of Utah.
Although I mentioned that you've been in this role as the CEO of YWCA Utah for 11 months, certainly these issues of domestic violence and social justice are not new to you. Tell us a little bit about your background.
So I came to the YWCA from the Utah Coalition Against Sexual Assault, where I was the executive director. And then my career has included stints at Planned Parenthood Association of Utah, as well as the Utah Domestic Violence Coalition. I also worked in London for some time with women who were impacted by the criminal justice system and working in women's rights. And I'm from Provo. So I was raised in Provo and went to school at Utah Valley University and was really drawn to gender equity and race equity and let that lead me in my career. And so I've really focused on serving women, particularly women who are at the margins, women who are experiencing poverty, single mothers, women impacted by violence and sexual assault. So that's what's led me to the Y. I feel like in some ways I've been preparing my whole career for this role. So although it's been a challenging year, in many ways I feel really prepared to take on that challenge.
Speaking of challenges, tell us how the needs of those women and those services that you provide, how they have changed through this pandemic year.
Yeah, so what's interesting is that the YWCA, we have a really powerful mission. We're a global organization, and in the USA, our mission is to eliminate racism and empower women. And we do that in multiple ways. The largest way that we do it in Utah is through our domestic violence services, but we also provide early education children's services from 6 weeks up through kindergarten. We provide young women's empowerment series and leadership development programs. We also host Real Women Run at the YWCA. You may have heard of that program. And then we have other community programs for women of color who are seeking community and healing, and other race equity programs. So we do a lot of things, and everything had to adjust. I mean, primarily our domestic violence services and our early education services, because those are in person. And as the months have changed, information has changed, precautions have changed, we've just continually had to adapt, always, that we do every aspect of our work. But we've been able to remain fully operational across all of our programs, and we're really proud.
Well, just remaining operational throughout all those challenges is a major victory, a major accomplishment. What are some of the other accomplishments that you look back on this past year and you think, wow, I'm grateful and maybe even amazed that you were able to do that? We'd love to hear about some of those.
Well, I mean, the first thing is absolutely just the staff. I mean, the staff showing up in so much uncertainty and fear for their own families, their own lives, the funding uncertainty, so the anxiety about whether or not we'll have funding and jobs and that sort of thing, and then showing up for the people in our community, the women and children who need our services, and showing up in a way that's trauma-informed, thoughtful, creative, compassionate, is the thing I'm most proud of. And then there are other things that we were able to do this year, like in response to the sort of racial reckoning happening across the country, we hosted a 21-day race equity and social justice challenge for our community, and we had over 6,000 participants across the world, actually, and many organizations in Utah take part. And that was a part of YWCA Utah doing our own work to figure out how we are accountable and live up to our bold and powerful mission to eliminate racism.
Well, and thank you for that work. You may not know this, but the Salt Lake Chamber was one of the organizations that participated in your 21-day challenge. And just speaking personally, it was really an eye-opening, informational experience for me, and hopefully a transformational experience too. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. I love to hear that.
So much of what presidents and CEOs and business owners and leaders of organizations have done over this past year has just been day by day. And sometimes a week feels like a year, and we sort of have lost track of time. But I'm sure as the leader of your organization, you've also kept an eye out to the future, what's on the horizon. And we'd love to hear about that. What do you see as the future under your leadership at YWCA Utah?
So as I explained, I love this question. As I explained, we have so many diverse programs, and they're all in an effort to meet the powerful boldness of our mission. And my focus is really on investing in staff. Last February, we were certified in the Sanctuary model, which is a trauma-informed organizational model. The communities that we serve are dealing with trauma. All of us individuals in this world deal with our own kinds of trauma, and that reverberates in the organization and in our policies, in the way that we treat each other, in the dynamics across programs and between staff. And so with that certification and that model, that helps us reflect on the way that we do our work, the way we understand our work, the way we communicate and take care of the well-being, both emotional, mental, and physical of our staff and our participants. And I really look forward to continuing that internal investment in our staff, in our programs, and in our participants. And I think we provide a wide breadth of services, and now it's about just investing in those services and making sure we have a really strong infrastructure for those programs as well as for funding, so that if we encounter things like a pandemic or a recession, we're really well positioned to handle the mental, emotional, and traumatic load on top of serving people in crisis. And we are financially positioned to weather that as well. One of the things that we've talked about in my leadership team is how, in many ways, the YWCA Utah is at the front of 3 public crises: domestic violence, racism, and homelessness. And so we feel that. We feel it every day in our work. And for me, it's about how do we make sure our foundation is really strong so that we can weather all of the uncertainty that happens in our larger society that impacts our everyday.
You mentioned earlier how the YWCA Utah wants to help support the community, and you referenced the 21-day challenge as an example of that. I want to ask you sort of the inverse question. What can the community do? What can business leaders do to support YWCA and your mission?
Well, thank you for that. I have, in the past 11 months, what has become just I've always known this, but what has become really salient is how any kind of community service, and particularly our community services, are 100% dependent on a community collaboration. It takes all of us, and part of what we do is partnering with businesses, whether that's, to meet all sorts of needs. And we have been really lucky in Utah because there have been so many businesses that have reached out to us or that we've reached out to who have been open to partnering, whether that is a volunteer day and they help update some of our children's play areas, or that is helping us access, for example, a vehicle where we have some funding but need to work with a business to make that happen. We've had so many powerful partners. And so if there are businesses out there who would like to get involved, I think that the world is really our oyster in terms of how we might imagine and create partnerships. There's just so many things that we can do that I think will meet the needs and the desires of the organizations to make an impact, and the businesses to make an impact, and meet the needs of our community that we serve at YWCA Utah. So it definitely takes all of us, and it has absolutely in the past year taken a partnership with our local businesses.
Well, I'm glad to hear that partnership is happening and working and expanding. Liz Owens, the CEO of YWCA Utah, thank you for everything that your organization is doing and your staff, your team is doing. And thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Derek.